Now, the vaccine, key question to underpin it before you get to the detail, would you be prepared to make it vaccination mandatory?
Well, certainly, we've got to get about 95%. And so we'd be applying that as, well, I'll take it medical advice. That's the obvious answer to that, Neil, but that's what I would be expecting.
You would expect it to be mandatory?
I would expect it to be as mandatory as you can possibly make it. There are always exemptions for any vaccine on medical grounds, but that should be the only basis. I mean, we're talking about a pandemic that has destroyed, the global economy and taken the lives of hundreds of thousands all around the world, and over 430 Australians here. So, we need the most extensive and comprehensive response to this to get Australia back to normal.
I take your point. We need a high level of uptake, but there's going to be, I think you'll get community resistance to mandating it.
Well, we'll take that issue when it presents based on when the clinical trials are finished, and we have to understand what the medical issues potentially might be, and that's why we'll take advice on its application. But I'm certainly open to that suggestion, but that is not a decision the government has taken.
Okay, so what's the deal? Everybody would get one free?
Yes.
Cost billions?
The costs we're working through, but no, that's not our anticipated costs. But we'll work through those costs with the manufacturer, and we'll make sure that will be made available to all Australians.
Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we would hope that based on where we think the clinical trials are and if they're successful, and I've got to stress, Neil, it's still a big if. I mean, we don't know it'll work, but we've got to be positioned to move on it quickly if it does. Then hopefully early next year. If it could be done sooner than that, then great. But I don't want to raise an expectation, you'll be able to get a jab next week.
Who would be first?
Well, again, that's the medical advice we'd take. I mean, obvious candidates would be health workers, those working in aged care facilities, things like that, as well as more vulnerable parts of the community. But that will be dependent on the medical issues that might present with some of those cohorts, those people groups. But by and large, then trying to get it out as quickly and as far and wide as possible.
When's the most optimistic time you think you could see it used in Australia?
Which one, AstraZeneca? Or?
Yeah.
Early next year.
Early next year. You know you're going to have campaigns from the anti-vaxxers, don't you?
Oh, I'm used to that. I was the minister that established no jab, no play. My view on this is pretty clear and not deterring.
Okay, so and you've also bought needles and syringes, all the equipment needed to.
Yeah, that's been done through an arrangement with Becton Dickinson for the supply of needles and syringes. So we're getting everything in order, but you've got to wait for the clinical trials to complete.
Okay, who would oversee it, state or federal?
It would be a federal program.
Okay, so it'd be the vaccination.
We'd obviously work with the states, as you do with any vaccine program, but it'd obviously be overseen like all other vaccine programs.
Well, I am hopeful, but also, naturally cautious. And it is good news. I mean, as people are going through each and every day, dealing with the restrictions, businesses, particularly people down in Melbourne and across Victoria, people in border towns, I know the real strain and stress. And today is a day of hope for all Australians, that the work that is being done out of Oxford, we've been able to strike this deal with AstraZeneca, and this would mean a vaccine for every single Australian, with the vaccines manufactured right here in Australia. And this is important news. We've gotten into this early, and that will mean, should the trials prove successful, that we can get on with it.
Yep. So for this to work, you've got to have a lot of people vaccinated. We're hearing reports today that a lot of your ministers are being spammed by the anti-vaxxers. What do you say to them in terms of safety and why we need to be vaccinated when this comes out?
Well, it's the same with any vaccination. And look, we've been subject to those things before. I was the Minister for Social Services that introduced no jab, no play. And you've just got to put forward the medical evidence and the science, and I think there is a strong weight of community opinion. You've got to get to herd immunity with any vaccines. And for those who are unable, for absolute medical reasons, not able to take vaccines, and that happens with many vaccines in the country, they're the ones who rely on everybody taking it even more. So you've got to do it for yourself, your family, and for your fellow Australians. I mean, people can't think of just themselves in these situations.
What do you need to get, level do you need to get to make it effective in the community?
It's about my advice is it's around about a 2/3 coverage when it comes to any sort of herd immunity. But we'll take the medical advice on that. But we're looking for universal coverage here, David. I mean, this pandemic has devastated economies, it's devastated livelihoods, and it's taken over 430 lives in Australia. And sadly, I fear worse news still to come on that front in the days and weeks ahead, given the outbreak in Victoria. And so it's important that we make this as far and wide application as possible.
Yeah, and also we've got to get borders open again, don't we, and get the economy moving, and this is the best way to do it.
A vaccine is the ultimate answer, but it also means that the work on contact tracing and testing, that hasn't changed, social distancing and cracking down on outbreaks. The information we're starting to see out of Victoria is improving. That's welcome, but there's still quite a distance to go there. In the rest of the country, I mean, we're doing very, very well, and we obviously want to see the economic side of this also addressed, and that will be a key topic for discussion again on Friday at the National Cabinet.
The progress of the vaccine, of the trials, the research, the science. The order of priority here has to be safety and effectiveness, and from that we can be in a position to roll it out. And the deal we have is for whole of population or universal vaccine coverage. So to be able to support all Australians, and that's an absolutely critical element that we insisted upon, but which was accepted readily by the company.
Okay, who goes first?
Well, our goal, as I say, is and our commitment is to provide the vaccine for all Australians, but inevitably will be guided in terms of priorities by the medical expert panel. But naturally, you'd be focusing on the most vulnerable, the elderly, the health workers, people with disabilities, in terms of the speed of rollout. But I think there'd be widespread uptake in Australia, and this would be a very important moment for the country.
Okay, well, you mentioned there's 25 million doses. What would happen if a second, say, booster shot is needed?
We'll make sure that we have enough vaccine for all of Australia's needs. So those doses are for the whole of population, but it's actually an agreement that's focused on the needs. So if it's a one-shot vaccine, we'd have that. If it's a two-shot vaccine, as some are, and these matters will be determined, we'd have enough for that. And we'll just keep going until we've got the Australian population protected. But it's not, no vaccine has been shown to be foolproof yet, but this is the most advanced in terms of production and in terms of the science and prospectivity from our perspective.
Okay, not everyone is going to take it up for a variety of reasons. What percentage of the country would you need to have it to be able to call it a success, to be able to, I guess, achieve herd immunity from that point?
So herd immunity is generally defined as being 2/3 for a coronavirus treatment, but we always aim for 95% with vaccines. For example, we announced on the weekend that our childhood immunisation rate had reached a record level for 5-year-olds of 94.77%. So Australians are great at taking up immunisation. We're one of the world's leading nations with regards to our immunisation rates. And indeed, our Indigenous 5-year-old rate is at 96.9%. So what that shows is that Australians will adopt and embrace an immunisation or a vaccination, and that's a very important national culture. So
just to be clear, you'd need above 70%, really, of the nation to have the vaccine to be able to, kind of eradicate the virus.
Correct, but of course our goal with any vaccination is to achieve a 95% uptake. And we've done extraordinarily well. Record rates only announced on Sunday for immunisation around the country. So I'm very confident that Australians will embrace this to protect themselves, but then to protect everybody else. It's about doing the right thing, but I think we've shown through the course of this pandemic extraordinary strength, resilience and community spirit. I've got to say I loved Australia beforehand. I'm just in awe of the Australian people and our medical community now.
You did mention that you would still like a few more other options. So we've locked in one deal. How many would you like to have? And I suppose, what does this mean for the UQ trials that are a little bit further back?
Look, UQ is one of the world's leading candidates. It's what's known as the molecular clamp. We've invested $5 million in that, so we're very, very supportive and optimistic about the University of Queensland. It's been identified by the Gavi, the Global Alliance of Vaccines, and CEPI, again, one of the international consortiums on vaccines, as being one of the world's most prospective candidates. So we're deeply engaged. We're sponsoring that research, and if that proves to be successful, we would love that to be part of the Australian Army. So we'll work on a number of fronts, and that's guided by a medical expert panel on vaccinations led by Professor Brendan Murphy, the Secretary of the Health Department, and I think now very well known to Australians as just an extraordinary medical leader.
Okay, Minister, just onto this outbreak in Sydney, there's a bit of deja vu about this. We've got something that may have leaked from a hotel via a guard. Can I just get, first of all, your thoughts and your reaction to what's happening in Sydney?
Look, fortunately, Sydney's in a very different position to Melbourne, not just in terms of the numbers, but the contact tracing system in New South Wales is one of the world's leading contact tracing systems. That means they're able to hunt down all of the links, all of the cases, to test, to isolate. So this combination of trace, test, isolate, that's kept New South Wales safe from multiple outbreaks that were similar in magnitude to Victoria. But New South Wales has been able to do that, and that's the model that we've been pushing Victoria to adopt and embrace. We've offered the Australian Defence Force to them, and they've now accepted that, and that's helping to strengthen their tracing system. But what New South Wales has is this testing and tracing. But if you do have symptoms, whether it's in New South Wales or anywhere else in Australia, please keep being tested. It will help protect you, and it will help protect our elderly. Should
a security guard, though, have been allowed to work other jobs if he was at a hotel quarantine?
Look, I don't have the details of that, so I'll leave New South Wales to address that. Our job is to make sure that the system is as strong as possible. The Prime Minister has appointed Jane Holton, a former Secretary both of Finance and of Health at federal level, to review the individual state and territory quarantine systems, and she's currently doing that around the country.
As Health Minister, though, are you disappointed that you're seeing this again, though, a leak from a hotel?
It's a highly contagious disease, and our goal is to make sure that whether it's in health work, whether it's in quarantine, whether it's in any part of the country, the best possible systems are in place. We'll continue to work with the states and territories. That's why we've appointed Jane Holton to review the individual quarantine systems. I've got to say, the New South Wales system has helped protect Australians by detecting many, many cases. Right across Australia, over 400 cases have been detected and prevented from escaping to the community. It does look like they've got onto this early. It does look like they're tracing it. And on yesterday's figures, I believe there were 3 cases right across New South Wales. So if we continue to test, to trace, to isolate, that's what's going to save lives.
Kelly talked about linking it to programs. The PM mentioned many times about the no jab, no pay policy. What types of things could this vaccine be linked to? Are we talking about people not being allowed to go to restaurants and bars, or would people not be able to attend schools or catch public transport? How broadly could the restrictions apply?
So once again, I'll just take a step back and say that we have spoken about vaccines so much this year, that Australians have gone through so much pain with restrictions and stage 4 and 3 restrictions in Victoria at the moment. At the same time, we've had record influenza vaccine uptake. And so the first step is going to be is never the stick. The first step is always engaging with Australians, with the community, doing some of that complicated explaining that I've attempted to do today, but really reassure Australians that the vaccine that we eventually get is safe, it's effective, and when we roll it out, we monitor it just as we do the new strain influenza vaccines every year through our really robust regulatory system. And it's that confidence that is going to get the bulk of Australians getting vaccinated. I have absolutely no doubt about that. But there will be strong, I suspect the majority of Australians will get vaccinated, and then there will be a strong public view that those who choose not to get vaccinated need to. There needs to be some sort of incentive stick, perhaps, through the current programs, including No Jab, No Pay, to make that happen. So I think that is a very reasonable interpretation of what the PM had to say today. Again, looking at specific things like not being able to go into restaurants, not being able to travel internationally, not being able to catch public transport, or more broadly having what in the olden days would have been a yellow fever vaccination certificate. These are clearly policy decisions that will be discussed, but there's no current mechanism to enforce that sort of thing at the moment.